I'm going to show you tried and tested, proven ways to lower the humidity in your bearded dragon's enclosure. So let's get straight into it. There's a few ways you can lower the humidity in your bearded dragon's enclosure, and humidity is very important. You can't have the humidity too high, because if it is too high, they start having respiratory problems in their lungs, infections. They have to have the correct humidity of around about 35 to 40% humidity is absolutely perfect. Now there's a few ways you can measure the humidity inside your enclosure that are all very cost effective. So a couple of ways you can measure the humidity are simple gauges. We've got a gauge just there built into the background. We've got a gauge in that hole just there. We have got a gauge just there, and all the way over the cold side we've got another gauge. Simple hygrometer is what they're called. That's just your standard dial hygrometer. When you do buy one, make sure you don't get it confused with a thermometer. You can see the writing on the bottom of that Exoterra dial compared to the writing on the bottom of that hygrometer. I've got 3 different hygrometers dotted throughout the enclosure. Hot side, middle and the cold side. In the middle I do have 2, one at the bottom and one at the top of the enclosure, because he is a ground dwelling animal, but he can get up, and it's amazing the humidity change between the top and the bottom. Humidity rises. That's why I do that. If you're like me and you do have a few different humid animals inside the same room as your bearded dragon, you are going to struggle with humidity. It's not a massive problem. You can rectify it with various number of ways. Let's go through a few of them right now. First and most simplest is your water dish. Have you got a big water dish? Is it over on the hot side? It might be worth going down a size. As you can tell, you can go from a big bowl to a little bowl, and that'll do just fine. If your water bowl is over on the hot side of the enclosure, simply pick it up and move it to the cold side of the enclosure. Less temperature means less humidity. If you've got less temperature on your water, it will evaporate slower and you'll have lower humidity. Now, back when I had this same problem a few years ago, I did all the research that you guys are doing right now, and the one that I kept stumbling across was get a sock and fill it full of dried rice, which is what I did. And I've left it in the enclosure for a couple of years now. I've changed the rice, I've changed the sock a few times, but I've left it in there. I noticed a humidity drop of around about 3%. So if you're only 3% over, that's all you'll need to do. I got a sock of rice and I put it on the cold side of the enclosure on the ground. I hidden it away beneath his ledge. Right tucked down underneath there was where the sock of rice was, so I couldn't see it. It wasn't aesthetically unpleasing, and it worked. Doing that got me a humidity drop of around 3%. But when I was searching, it wasn't enough. I had a lot of humid animals around, tropical species in the same room as my bearded dragon, so I had to do more. What else did I do? I changed the substrate out. The substrate that was in there was holding a little bit of moisture, which was making it a little bit more humid. So I changed the substrate out, got an extremely dry substrate in. A lot of people don't use substrate. That's also advisable if you want to go down that road. We won't get onto the substrate debate right now, but you can change the substrate out and go for an extremely dry substrate. That'll drop your humidity. It dropped my humidity by a further 4%, but that still wasn't enough. It was at that point my research dried up. I couldn't find any more knowledge, so I had to go a bit vague. I had to go and find other ways of lowering the humidity. Stay tuned. This is where it gets interesting. Let me know in the comment section below if these tricks are working for you, if they have worked for you, or if you've got any other tricks and tips you know to lower the humidity in your bearded dragon's enclosure. I'd love to know. Stick it in the comment section below. So with some of my tropical species, the way to increase the humidity in there is to slightly block off some of the ventilation. So I sat and thought, why not make more ventilation in my bearded dragon's enclosure and see if that helps? And it did. So I added 2 big ventilation holes in the back corner. I added a full strip of ventilation across the whole back. That decreased my humidity by 9%. All I needed was an extra 3% and then I'd be on the 35% mark. That worked, so maybe more ventilation would work. So that's exactly what I did. But because I've got hygrometers dotted all throughout the enclosure, I noticed my highest humidity area was on my hot side. And I know he spends an awful lot of time basking. He's there right now. So I needed to make the ventilation on that side. It was a Sunday morning, and in the UK we've got something called car boot sale. I think you Yanks call them yard sales. And I found this. A hole cutter. I thought, that'll do. And then I went on eBay, measured the diameter of that, and I got a ventilation circle the same size as that. And I simply drilled a hole into the side of the enclosure at the top, because that's where the most humidity was, and stuck it in. But with me having a custom background that I built myself, I don't really want a vent on the inside of the enclosure, so this is what I did. On the other side, on the enclosure, I drilled some holes through the background, hardly even noticeable, and the ventilation goes straight the way through now. And that was it. Absolutely perfect. My humidity level was at 35%, and that worked for me. Hopefully you found some tips and tricks from this. If it helps, hit the thumbs up button, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Let me know in the comment section below if it has worked.